What's up, guys? This is Pat, and before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder to please hit that subscribe button and leave us a rating and review. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn at The Founder Hour. All right, here we go.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. My name is Posh.
I'm Pat.
And we are here today with Glenn Sanford. Glenn, thank you for joining us. Glenn is the founder of eXp Realty, the chairman and CEO of its parent company, eXp World Holdings. And most recently, he joined VirBELA as the chief strategy officer when they acquired them in 2018. And we're excited to hear his story and how he began and how eXp is now nearly 60,000 agents and growing, and things such as real estate and technology and all the things that go into being the founder and the CEO and a chief strategy officer. So Glenn, we're excited to chat with you today.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Posh. And thanks, Pat. Hey, yeah, and just little quick snippet there. We're actually just over 29,000 agents. So I think you said 60,000. So that's next year's number.
I apologize. Yeah. I thought I heard 59 originally, so I rounded it up to 60. But hey, I doubled it for you. That's a new goal for your company. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. So it is what it is.
There you go. Well, we've been growing pretty fast, so it's not long, and we'll be there.
Love it. Glenn, talk to us a little bit about your early days. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm Canadian by birth. I was born north of Edmonton. In fact, in a little town called Peace River, Alberta. Technically, from time to time, we had to look south to see the northern lights. So that's how far north we were. And was there till I was about 3, and then we moved to the lower mainland of British Columbia, just outside of Vancouver, and lived there till I was 13. Went to grade school and middle school, and then my dad sold his business it was actually a granola manufacturing business that he sold to Kellogg's, and we went and moved to Oklahoma to be in the oil and gas business. So I've been all over the place, and then I guess it's 86 on. I've been pretty much Pacific Northwest based, so north of Seattle. That's where I've been living, and raised a family, a couple daughters, 24 and 26 now, and just kind of just, and then right here on the water, looking out in the ocean. So it's kind of a nice spot to be sequestered at home.
Right. Tell us, like, as a kid, what kind of things you were like into. Do you remember sort of, what you like to spend your time doing? Was there anything in particular, or were you just sort of like a regular kid just trying a bunch of things?
No, well, I was not a regular kid. I remember actually one of my math teachers I guess it must have been 6th grade, but he brought a Apple II computer to school in late 1977, and I fell in love with that. That was at the time, 48K of RAM, and I think the particular machine he had a cassette tape drive. And then he'd rent it out for 25 cents an hour for students to play on. So I brought rolls of quarters and just sort of lived on the computer. And fortunately, around that time, my dad was doing fairly well with his business, and so he ended up buying an Apple II computer, and it was and we got the bigger one. We got 64K of RAM as opposed to 48K of RAM, and I had 2 5.25-inch floppies, a green phosphorus monitor, 9-pin dot matrix printer, and I played around on that machine like pretty much day and night. I had a 300 baud modem, so if you remember Matthew Broderick and War Games, I was kind of doing that. I had the modem dialing sequentially every number that I could possibly find to see if I could find bulletin boards or different things that were sort of connected to a phone line. Didn't find any thermonuclear war games, but it was but I was pretty geeky, and then continued on, into high school. Continued to stay pretty dedicated to sort of tech and and that was kind of my thing. I was somewhat athletic. I played soccer. I was a long distance runner, and I ended up actually kind of interesting in Oklahoma. Went to a really small school, only 50 kids in my graduating class. Didn't have a track and field team or a cross country team, which was something that I enjoyed doing. In Oklahoma, they don't even know what soccer is. Like that's like a totally foreign subject. And The only people that ran at the in high school were the basketball players and the wrestlers. The wrestlers to cut weight, and so I ended up becoming a wrestler my junior and senior year because they were the only ones that ran long distance. And at the same time, I started up a track team and started up a quasi country cross country team, and so that's kind of what I did.
And like career wise, like, after high school, did you like envision yourself sort of, I guess, tell us what you did. Like, did you go to college? What did you study? Was computer programming, computer science, the path for you, or were you thinking of other things too?
Yeah, so I was really intrigued with the combination of where computer science and business sort of combined. So before there was an MIS degree, you either did computer science in the engineering department or you did business and economics through the business school, and they didn't really sort of combine the two. So I did take some computer courses in university, and they were kind of my easy A's. I kind of just breezed through those. But ironically, when I graduated from high school, I don't know what exactly I was planning on doing, but the only thing that I was really good at school wise was my computer class. I don't even think I was really great at math. I really didn't apply myself on the math side, but athletics and uh, and then computers. And so I graduated high school with a 192 and literally had to get in on my SAT and ACT scores, which were at the very top 1-2% of scores. But my grade point wasn't there, and but I ended up going to the University of Oklahoma, and that was good. I ended up going there, and but I was an entrepreneur at heart, which meant that if I saw an idea, I started to pursue it. And in fact, my first business was probably when I was 15. I started a business called Sandware Software, and it was I was writing code on a TRS-80 for a garage door company, and I was getting paid in chips and pop. And so I was always really kind of in that realm of things. And then when I went to university, I ended up either chasing girls or doing a little bit of work just to make sure that I didn't totally flunk out of school.
So you're obviously a big fan of the chase, and being an entrepreneur, you're always chasing, right? You're always chasing for the next big idea. You're chasing for capital. You're chasing for customers, et cetera, et cetera. I know that before you even started any of the companies that we've mentioned early on, you did a lot of different things to get to where you are today. So after you went to college, what was the path for you, right? What did you end up doing?
Yeah, so I ended up bouncing around university wise a little bit, and I was when I was 21, I was actually going to school in Phoenix, Arizona, to a community college, Phoenix College, and I was managing a bar at night. And my dad, being kind of a consummate business entrepreneur, he and one of his business partners came to the bar one evening, and I don't think my dad actually thought that that was a real career. So he decided that I should go to Las Vegas to become a stockbroker. So at 21, I became a stockbroker in 1987, right after the collapse. I ended up becoming a stockbroker, and I did that for about 6 months. I ended up working for a firm in Las Vegas that was more akin to the movie Boiler Room than a firm that one would be called respectable. And so after about 6 months, I said, "This isn't for me." And then I went back to school again. A little while later, I got married, and but I was at the time I was really enjoyed investing, and so I think I was 26, 27 at the time. And so I posted a lot of stock picks onto Prodigy and America Online, and and they did really well. And AOL actually tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I'd run their financial bulletin boards. So I actually did that for a while, probably 6-7 months. I was managing their Sunday night investment chats, and I was managing all their financial bulletin boards. And people used to ask me how I knew so much about stocks, and I said, "Well, I used to be a stockbroker." And I literally had people reach out to me and say, "Hey, if you ever become a stockbroker again, we'd love to open an account with you." And so I became a stockbroker again. I was going to university, but I ended up becoming a stockbroker. And within just a few months, I had $500,000 under management, which is a pretty sizable amount back in the early '90s. And what I found is that when I spent 4 hours a day in the library actually researching stocks, I did really well. But what ended up happening is, as a stockbroker, I ended up spending 10 hours a day talking to people on the phone. So after about 6 to 8 months, I ended up burning out again because my stock picks weren't doing as well as they used to be. And so that was one of the things that I did. Another thing that I was really into was network marketing was a big one. I ended up being, an Amway distributor a couple times. I ended up involved with another network marketing company called New Ways International. I actually did all the templated websites for a bunch of their distributors back in the early '90s. Actually, that was about '97. I built an online service in Western Canada called Interactive Cafe, which ended up being the largest online service in Western Canada. So I was really into sort of the online community side of things. And then in 1998, 99, I had somebody reach out to me and ask me if I'd write a business plan for an internet project. And I said, well, I just happen to be thinking about one right now. So I wrote a plan for an e-commerce logistics company. And he was supposed to raise me about $500,000. Ended up raising about 30,000, and so I was had this business plan that actually made a lot of sense, and so I ended up getting it funded, the first round of funding right before the .com collapse. So I got a couple million in. We needed about 40 million more, and of course we got kind of chased out just because we needed so much money and everything was collapsing. But we had a good set of partners. In 2002, though, I ended up sort of licking my wounds and got my real estate license while I was looking for another project. And it just ended up happening that real estate ended up being that next project. So that was kind of what was happening then.
And Glenn, how old were you around this time in 2002?
I was 35 at the time. So 35. I'm 53 now. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So you were bouncing around from all these different jobs, and I'm sure you were doing well in all of them. But along the way, was there anything that stood out to you, or anything that you particularly enjoyed that you thought, okay, I can spend my life doing this? Because right now I look at myself. I'm almost 28 years old, and same with Pat, and we like a lot of things. We have passions for different things, and a lot of people our age, I think, feel the same way. And the world is obviously always changing, and now with this pandemic, it's changing even more, and it's even faster. But there's really nothing that I've grabbed onto and said, I want to go all in on this, right? And I feel like, oh man, I'm almost 30. I should have had it figured out by now. Did you ever feel that way? And how did you overcome that, if so?
Yeah, I think for me, I really enjoyed doing interesting things, hoping that it was the one. I was looking for, I'd met a number of people who had, at a fairly young age had hit home runs, and I was kind of wondering why I hadn't had to hit a home run yet, because I mentally was there. That's where my passion was to building different projects and companies and trying to figure out what worked and what didn't work. I think by the time I hit 35, I was, I had two daughters. I married fairly young, but still needing to actually make money. So for me, I needed to put food uh, on the table. And so for me, I really just wanted to make enough money to actually go from where we were at the time, which ironically, if we would have went back a couple of years, I was driving, a nice Chrysler Concorde. I had a lot of, some trappings of success, not huge trappings, but when we moved back to Washington State from Arizona for my e-shippers days, we ended up having to trade the car in on a Geo Metro and an old Ford Focus wagon, and I was $40,000 more in debt than I was before we ended up starting our previous company. So for me, I needed to make some money initially and just make sure that I at least paid the bills. But what I was passionate about was where technology could really sort of change things relative to the game. And so in the 90s, I'd started the online service. I started a web design company. I was really good at sort of understanding the SEO side of things. And in 2002, I had actually been doing SEO for a local realtor's website. He was 64, 63 at the time, and I was 35, and he decided that I was going to get my real estate license. It wasn't me deciding I was going to get my real estate license. He actually said, Glenn, you need to go get your real estate license. And I mentioned to Hugh, I said, Hugh, I don't want to get my real estate license. Nobody makes any money in real estate their first few years in the business. And he literally said, well, what's it going to take? And I go, I don't know, guarantee me $3,000 a month. And he said, fine. I'm like going, and I'm literally going, oh crap. I really didn't want him to say that he would guarantee me that. And then I said, okay, well, I'm just going to build this business online. I'm not going to do the realtor pin at the grocery store. I'm not going to be talking to my friends and family. I'm going to build it online, and it's either going to work or it's not. And so this was really kind of around the lead generation side of generating leads. And he said, fine, 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 fine. And then 30 days later, he asked me why I didn't have my real estate license. And at the time, you could get your real estate license about 2 weeks. You just cram course online. And I said, well, Hugh, I get paid $60 an hour to do website development work. So I just haven't done my coursework. And he goes, well, I'll pay you $60 an hour. Go get your darn license. So I got paid $60 an hour to study for, I think it was 30 hours or 60 hours. Anyway, there was quite a number of hours, but he ended up spending $3,000-$4,000 just up front before I was even doing anything in the business, just for me to get my real estate license. And so he kind of just decided I was going to get that license. So for me, I was bouncing around, but one of the things that was kind of interesting at that point in time is that somebody had actually invested in me, actually put their money on the line to actually get me in the business. And it kind of changed my mindset a little bit, in that I wanted to make sure that I created a good return for somebody else's investment. That's always been sort of mentally one of the things that it's a lot of times, if it's my own money, I don't really care if I lose it. It's okay. But if it's somebody else's money, I'm dog on bone. I'm going to make sure that I do everything in my power to actually do something with it. So for me, that was probably the thing that sort of drew me in, and to be really focused and have a lot of attention on what I was doing. And because I was so attentive, I ended up getting traction in ways that most people in the real estate business never got. So, first year in the business, I was Rookie of the Year, sold 17 properties to people I met just online. And then, of course, I showed them properties and drove them around once they got to town. But by my fourth full year, I did $60 million in production in real estate, which in 2006, 2006. That was a lot of business. That put me in probably the top 10% of the top 1% in terms of just production volume. And at that point, I finally figured out that I had something. I had something that was generating 7 figures a year in total income after expenses. I was probably making $300,000 a year. Wasn't bad for that point in time. I was still under 40. But I could see that if I continued to kind of go in that direction, that there could be some real big wins if I could just organize effectively.
You mentioned growing up, you had this sort of entrepreneurial bug in you. You wanted to be an entrepreneur, and a lot of the jobs you talk about are very entrepreneurial, like being a stockbroker or selling real estate. You're sort of working for yourself. It's like you want to put in the effort and build out your clientele, then you'll reap the rewards as if you were like a business owner, obviously. So, but when you were sort of entering actually, my question before I get into this was, you talk about how your dad was an entrepreneur and he sold his business. How much of seeing him doing what he was doing and being an entrepreneur was an inspiration to you growing up? And was that part of the reason why you sort of had this bug in you?
Yeah, I think absolutely. The fact that I saw when I was born, because I didn't pay that much attention at that point in time, but I did remember at under 3 years old, we lived in a single wide manufactured home up in northern Alberta. And I remember just looking across the grass, and there's some train tracks that ran the background. We moved. We pulled our home to Abbotsford, British Columbia, and so we lived in the same single wide manufactured home. But at that point in time, my dad, my uncle, and my grandpa all ran a honey business. So they used to run bees from northern California up to northern Alberta. So in the summer it was in Alberta, and in the winter it was in California. And um, uh, he ended up they ended up taking about $9,000 and putting it into a granola manufacturing plant, and getting into the cereal business, partially because honey went into to granola. And over the course of from 1971, 72 through 1978, we went from that single wide manufactured home to what ended up being at the time the second largest home in British Columbia, or in the lower mainland of British Columbia. 10,000 square foot home, um, you know, two kitchens, a indoor swimming pool, a bunch of stuff. And a lot of people would come over, a lot of friends, and those types of things. And so I I saw at the same time I was sort of paying attention, just the way a kid pays attention to the fact that I had friends that their parents went to work, had normal jobs, but they struggled. They didn't have sort of the financial wherewithal that we had at that point in time, and so I really started to develop some thoughts and ideas around business ownership versus being an employed individual. And again, lots of people can create great career paths and actually do as well, in a lot of cases better than the self-employed. But I always considered the idea of actually taking a job being more risky than being an entrepreneur, which is sort of the opposite of the way most people think. Most people think that being an entrepreneur is the riskier proposition. And I've always thought that actually having a job in a traditional sense is the riskier proposition, because you'll never really make more than you get in a paycheck. That ends up being so. So mentally, I just was always programmed around this idea that if I could figure things out, then there would be an upside that would be far outweigh um, having a normal job. But at the same time, I always was very creative in just the way I looked at business. And so for me, even if I was broke pursuing something, the fact that the upside existed, even if I didn't get it, was enough to actually make it more enjoyable than working in a more traditional sense.
Glenn, I'm curious, what made you a good salesperson, and what were you doing differently than others to get you to that level of being in that 0.1% in terms of production volume? Um, was it anything different? Was it something special, or was it just, grit and being consistent and persistent?
Yeah. Well, sales is one of the toughest businesses you can possibly be in. It's actually and now a friend and a mentor of mine, who I listened to all of his audios back when I was in my 20s and 30s. A gentleman named Tom Hopkins. He's now in his 70s, but he and I actually spent a little time together now. But he talked about sales being the lowest paying easy work and the highest paying hard work. And uh, and I sucked at sales in the beginning. I literally, I did try to sell Kirby vacuum cleaners, which, by the way, after about 3 months, I actually figured out how to sell Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door. And that for me was a huge breakthrough. And I realized that,
Tell us what that breakthrough was.
yeah, so the breakthrough for me was I I started to truly believe in the product. That was one, and uh, and I didn't fight the process. There's a lot of people, when they enter sales, they just want to just put all the information out there, and they just expect that people are going to know what they know, as opposed to actually feeding it to them and providing sort of that positive feedback cycle of showing, getting an anchor, getting agreement, and then going on to the next feature or benefit, et cetera, and sort of kind of working somebody up the ladder of understanding. And I think a lot of salespeople, they just come in and they just spout off everything they know and expect people are going to buy the product, as opposed to really sort of creating a meeting of the minds between you and the person you're talking to and actually having a real conversation. Not much different than what we're doing right here, a real conversation where we're getting to know each other, getting to know the benefits, and then bouncing conversations, but at the same time recognizing that they've invited you into their home, most likely recognizing full well that you're there to sell them a vacuum cleaner, and they realize that that's how you make your living. And so to a large extent, they're hoping at some level that you can actually help them buy this fairly expensive piece of hardware that all it does is pull dust out of the carpet. So and by the way, a Kirby vacuum cleaner back in, well, this I was 17 years old, 18 years old at the time. So this would have been 86,
84.
85, 84, 85. At that point in time, the Kirby vacuum cleaner was $1,000. So we're talking about a really expensive piece of hardware, and I could discount it down to $800 and still get paid my full commission, which was $200 on the machine. But what ended up happening is that as I did more and more demos, I became more and more comfortable with the product, and then I actually believed in the product, and actually believed that people truly needed to own it. And at that point, I could sell Kirby vacuum cleaners very well. But up until that point in time, I couldn't sell the Kirby vacuum cleaner very well. But once I did, that was great. But what ended up happening after that, which was interesting as well, is that I overheard what my boss paid for the Kirby vacuum cleaner that I was selling for between $800 and $1,000 for. And once I found out what he paid for the machine, which was under $200, I couldn't sell another Kirby vacuum cleaner to save my life. So for the next month, I was going out on demos trying to sell a Kirby vacuum cleaner, and I couldn't sell another single freaking Kirby vacuum cleaner to anybody else. And so that was a point in time that I realized that I had to truly be sold myself on anything that I was selling. And if I wasn't sold myself, it didn't even make any sense to try to sell a product or service.
Yeah, it's like that sort of realization plus the realization of like when you start understanding like margins and where the money's going and coming from and all that kind of stuff, and especially as someone who is entrepreneurial, it sort of sparks something in you where it's like there's this like thin line between who you're working for and you doing it for yourself and keeping all or having the control over the company. And so I guess going back, one of the questions that I had that was part of my last question was when you sort of entered the real estate market, in the early 2000s, it was a certain way. And it sounds like you weren't sort of entering the market to play by the rules. You wanted to, bring your own approach to it. And you were curious about this intersection of technology and business. So how did you start approaching real estate? Like, did you first have to learn the way things were to then innovate and figure out ways to change things up, or how did you go about it?
Yeah, so in 2002, I had fortunately been working on websites and website design really since probably 1996. In fact, right when NCSA Mosaic showed up on the scene, even prior to that, I was doing stuff on Gopher and Veronica and a lot of the old style sort of internet protocols. So I really enjoyed website design, but I also was learning about all the traffic building strategies. And so in 2002, when I had a website up in the Pacific Northwest, it was called birchbay.net. And at the time, it was the Chamber of Commerce website, and I lent them the domain. I was building the website for free. It's sort of a community service kind of activity that I was doing. The chamber decided to give the website back to me, and they started their own website. But I had all this website that had a lot of traffic coming in, and so when I approached Hugh Brawford to actually advertise on the website, his email bounced initially. And so I actually called him, fixed his email, and he decided that he was going to hire me to work on his website and generate him leads, which I did. And at that time, if you were to go into a real estate office, every single sales manager said that the internet's a waste of time. The buyers aren't serious. There was a whole bunch of reasons why it didn't make sense to pursue that from their perspective, but that's exactly what I pursued. So I was generating internet leads, but I was also pursuing a heavy search engine optimization strategy. So I had at one point in time 6 of the top real estate websites in the country, city followed by the term real estate, organically on Google and Yahoo and a bunch of different websites. And so I was generating 99% of all of our business was buyer-based leads. So it wasn't like we were going out and getting listings, which is still a fairly traditional approach. Go out and get a listing, put a sign on the ground, advertise it, generate some buyers. Hopefully some of those buyers have houses to sell, go out, sort of rinse and repeat. And that's kind of the standard model. For us, we were really all about generating the internet lead. And then the second part of it was something that I figured out really in 2002 as an agent, which was the follow-up process that I developed was around actually doing virtual tours for buyers. So I literally, because we had so many people looking from out of area, I was driving that Ford Focus wagon I mentioned earlier, and I was looking in the passenger seat while I was thinking about showing property to somebody who wasn't there, and I'm going, my digital camera is there, and I said, why don't I just take photos from a buyer's perspective and just start sending those to the buyer? And so I started to do that, and I was able to quickly create a photo roll of 30 to 50 photos. I'd go to the office, I'd upload it because that's where the high-speed internet was. I'd send them a link. They'd see all these photos that they didn't see anywhere else, and all of a sudden they were my client. And so it really was this service orientation. So as an agent, I quickly, probably by year 2, I developed what Buyer Tours. I still own the domain name buyertours.com, but Buyer Tours was kind of my catchphrase. If you wanted to work with me, I work with buyers. I do property previews. And so that's what I coached all the agents that end up working with me is this Buyer Tour system, which was, again, totally right angle to what the industry coached then, and to a large extent what the industry coaches now. Everything's still very listing centric, and so that's what really put us on a different path and a different trajectory business wise.
Glenn, at what point did you go from being a salesperson and working on getting leads to actually growing the team and starting to develop something just bigger than yourself?
Yeah, so I started a little bit in 2002. I became an agent. By 2003, I had figured out that I could generate leads in more markets than I could handle personally. And so I started to generate leads in some other markets and try to refer those out to other agents. But eventually, what I found, and this was in 2004, that if I was actually going to convert those leads to closed transactions, I actually had to have agents on my team who were following my follow-up systems. If I gave somebody a referral, a lead in their market, and they were going to have to pay me at that, which is pretty traditional in real estate, a 25% referral, a lot of agents would look at that lead and go, I'm not really excited about working that lead for a 25% referral if I can work my own database and not have to pay any referral. So there was always a bit of a debate in their mind over what leads they would actually pursue, the one they make 100% on or the one that they got to pay a 25% referral on. So we had to actually scale a team because we needed to actually control the closings. So we effectively said all closings are team closings if you want the leads. So we ended up attracting agents to our team saying, hey, we've got leads, and all these closings end up being part of this of the mix. And so whether they were working my leads or they were working their own database, they still had to pay the same referrals into the team. And so that was sort of the first foray into growing a team. And we started with a couple agents in early 2004. we ended up by 2005, I think I ended up having about 4 teams at that point. And by 2006, I think we got to 5 or 6 teams, over 45 agents across uh, 5 or 6 different marketplaces. So we had really scaled quite quickly, and I would really move from being in the day-to-day sales to now being more mentorship, accountability, and training. At that point I actually referred to myself as the highest paid assistant in real estate, because I literally was in there helping anybody who needed help, and wanted to just help them, stay on track and keep things moving forward.
So as we all know, in 2008, everything, went crashing down. So tell us sort of your experience at that time. As I understand, this is pre eXp Realty and, launching that whole sort of cloud-based service. So, what was your experience like at that time?
Yeah, well, in 2007, I actually started my first real estate brokerage, and at that time it was called Buyer Tours Realty. So 2007, we broke out, went independent, started our own firm, and we'd grown that to effectively 3 going on 4 offices, and going into 2008, and then 2008 hit July, August, and really September of 2008. Lehman Brothers was going down fast. We had the mortgage meltdown, and basically, everything was freezing up in the economy, and so we ended up having to actually raise a little bit of money in October, November of 2008, just to get to 2009. We closed down 2 offices, went to a skeleton crew on our office in Bellingham, Washington, and we actually had to fundamentally ask ourselves if we wanted to continue to stay in real estate, because at that point, real estate was still a very much a bricks and mortar based business. You didn't see anything akin to a virtual real estate company at that point in time. And certainly if you did, it was not at any sort of scale. It might have been just a one-off in one city. But what we looked at in April 2009, one of the agents that was with me, Edie Kazaki, she asked, when do we get our offices back? And it was actually at a meeting that we had with a bunch of our teams, and we were in Arizona having this meeting, and I literally said, Edie, we're not going to get our offices back. We have to figure out a way to build a defensible business model that's not dependent on bricks and mortar. And I hadn't really sort of articulated it that succinctly up until that point in time. And to some extent, I was reacting to her in the moment, because she was like, she knew she wasn't getting the offices back, but she had to ask. And so I just said, hey, I just put the line in the sand. We've got to build this model that doesn't have physical offices attached to it. And what we knew about real estate, and I'd been involved with at one time a company called Keller Williams, and they're actually a pretty progressive company. They've got 160, 180,000 agents worldwide, and they run what they refer to as an open book company, meaning that anybody can see the financials of any office. And so I was on their agent leadership council before I started my own real estate brokerage. And so I got to see the books, and the biggest single cost to run a real estate brokerage is the bricks and mortar. And the second biggest cost to running a real estate brokerage is the staff. And every real estate office in America has the exact same staff. It has a receptionist, has a bookkeeper, potentially a sales manager, has somebody who fixes the copiers, and there's probably a runner or something like that. So you got 3, 4, 5 people in every office in America, and yet you can't really tell that much difference between one office from one brand to another office with another brand that's either across the street or across town. They're virtually identical. So for me, it's like, we're generating all of our own leads anyway. We don't, the location doesn't do anything for us. We've got now high-speed internet everywhere, including on our cell phones with LTE connections and everything else. And so it just made sense that we pursue a model that doesn't really depend on that bricks and mortar component. And so that was really kind of
Glenn,
that. Go ahead.
Just to interrupt you real quick, and it has to do with this, and I've worked in real estate before as well, not as an agent, but more so on the marketing side of things at a firm here in Los Angeles. And one thing I always asked myself, and I know Pat and I have discussed this as well, is I never understood why you even need a brick and mortar for a real estate company when you don't have any clients coming into the offices. Your offices are really the homes that you're showing or the homes that you've listed, right? Was it a matter of what was the reason why up to that point bricks and mortars were still around? Was it just because the technology wasn't there yet, or was it there and people didn't want to embrace it? I mean, it seems as though it's one of those industries that should have been the first to adopt technology and run away from the rent and whatever the taxes if you own the land that you're paying, right? So I'm curious as to the historical reasoning of that before you get into how you obviously built eXp.
Yeah, so I've debated this one internally and externally many times as well, because I quite frankly don't understand why more companies haven't went to a non bricks and mortar based model. But I think there's a couple things. One is the average age of a realtor historically has been 54 years old, and up until recently, if I consider myself really the early adopter at 13, 14 years old, 12 years old of technology, I still wasn't bored with technology. I sort of adopted it fairly early on, but I sometimes refer to myself as the oldest millennial you'll ever meet, just because I'm still very much geared toward the tech and social and all the other things that take place online. But that's not the average realtor. The average realtor, real estate's a second or third career for them. They're not really that entrepreneurial. Not even though they are entrepreneurs, they're micro entrepreneurs. They're in their local marketplaces, but they're not geared from a technology first perspective. So I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen and will continue to see bricks and mortar based real estate companies exist at some level of scale, even after what takes place here going on with the pandemic. I don't think we're going to see a lot of real estate offices leave. You're going to see more agents come to a company like eXp, but you're still going to see the Coldwell Bankers, the Keller Williams, the Remaxes, and the others are still going to have their physical locations, because that's just how they were built, and that's just how they're mentally sort of thinking about it. The other part of it is that a lot of real estate offices are part of a franchise network, and almost every one of the franchises has a bricks and mortar requirement that's actually part of the franchise agreement. So if you own a Coldwell Banker, you can't be a virtual company. You can't be that with Remax. You can't be that with Keller Williams. So it's got to be a different brand that's non-franchise based, or a brand new type of franchise that sort of allows people to be connected.
Right. So with all that in mind, 2007, 2008 comes around, like Pat asked, what leads to the eventual launch of eXp, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so mentioning obviously April 2009, we had that meeting in Arizona, and that really became the point in time where we started to say, what would be the defensible business model? Why would I, as an agent, be willing to leave my physical office where maybe I've got my own private desk and I've got maybe my own space to work out of? Why would I end up wanting to go to a non bricks and mortar based firm? Well, first and foremost, the financials got to make sense. So, in traditional real estate, most offices are still a 70-30 split, where the office gets 30%, the agent gets 70% of their commissions. And, some offices cap, some don't. But generally speaking, that's the model. And maybe there's a franchise fee that goes along with that. So for us, we said we've got to be better than that. So we developed an 80-20 model for our agents. The other part was we said, okay, what are the fastest growing real estate companies that have existed in the real estate space? And I mentioned Keller Williams, which really from the mid 90s up until really the present has been one of the fastest growing real estate companies of all time. And it grew fairly quickly. And what it did is it actually shared part of the local office profit with the agents and brokers who helped the company grow. So that was really a big, that was actually one of the reasons why I was at Keller Williams, is because that piece actually attracted me, because it gave me a way to build an extra stream of income. And as an entrepreneur, I'm like, why would I go to a company do my business and not be able to get something else for helping the brokerage grow if I can add that as an extra component to my business. So we actually ended up saying, well, if we don't have bricks and mortar expenses, could we pay out some amount of our revenue to our agents and brokers to help us grow? And so we actually developed a pretty unique revenue sharing program that was very attractive. So we now have agents, literally got a few that are some of them are making six figures a month just from helping the company grow. So they're making more than I do from an income perspective, just because they've helped grow the company. And some of them have 5, 6, 8,000 people that they've actually influenced to join eXp. So we put a sort of a, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, an MLM kind of component to actually agents attracting other agents to the brand. And so that really was a piece that for me had been appealing at Keller. And I figured that would be appealing for agents if we started a firm. And then the other piece that I really sort of thought about quite a bit was I always wanted to be an equity owner in the companies that I was involved in. And so we worked on it in 2009, couldn't quite get it put together at that point in time, just we were too small. But by 2013, we actually became a public company to actually share equity with our agents and brokers. So all of our agents are actually shareholders in now. At the time, it was trading OTC, but now we're a NASDAQ listed company. And so our goal was to sort of share all these elements to our agents and actually put them into a mindset that's more akin to a founder, to somebody who actually owns a business, that actually is growing a business, than a more traditional real estate agent that they just eat what they kill, which is fine. You can make a great living, but we actually created a different path. So we really kind of thought about all the benefits of being virtual and what benefits we could pass on to our agents. And that really created this huge growth curve. We started with 24 agents, well, 24 agents, I think, approximately back in 2009. And now, we have 29,000 agents that have signed on in all 50 states, most of Canada, UK, and Australia. And we're continuing to grow internationally. And so we've just continued to kind of beat on this drum of what can we do to make this better for our agents? What technology can we provide to them? And we've just continued to sort of iterate on the agent value proposition as we've went. And it's been, again, it's been a rocket ride from those early days when there were just a handful of us, sort of all could fit into one virtual office to now. The other thing that we did back in 2009 was we said, hey, if agents are going to actually work from home, how do we build community? And that's probably the one thing that we really thought a lot about. And we looked at, Facebook at the time, some of the quasi social networks that existed at the time. And we said, that's fine for, posts and things that have happened or what have you, but we need a sense of place. We need someplace we can go. So in 2009, we actually went and found a virtual world for business, which was actually an avatar-based environment to actually go to the office. So we actually took all of our agents and our staff, and we told everybody to go home, and we're going to actually log in. And we actually did this October 6, 2009. We all showed up in a virtual office as avatars. And I told the team, I said, this is either going to work or it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, we're all going to look for other work. So that was kind of again, another line in the sand of, let's make this work. Because if it doesn't work, we're not going to go back to the old way of doing things.
And how did it function? Because like that, I can imagine 2009, that was like a little bit before this whole wave of like virtual reality and headsets and developing virtual worlds and all this kind of stuff. So was it like just you log in, you have an avatar, but you're chatting like in a normal chat group, and you can see each other or not see each other? Like how did it function?
Yeah, no, it was a full-on virtual world for business. So it was ironic in 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009, Second Life had really created a huge buzz for this online gaming style community for social networks. And the challenge was with Second Life, and we had looked at Second Life at the time, is that there was no commonality to it. There was no reason why people would run into somebody and have a conversation with them and have enough in common to want to continue on having a conversation other than they both have avatars. And so what we kind of theorized at the time was that if we had a virtual world that was dedicated just to the subject of real estate and actually growing the brokerage, that the synergies and the serendipitous collisions would actually be meaningful enough that people would actually get value of going into this virtual world. So at the time we had we used a platform called Teleplace, which went out of business. A bunch of these companies actually went out of business, but you had this blockhead, and you'd walk around and have boardrooms and presentation theaters and those types of things. No room could hold more than about 35 people before the room started to break down, because the technology just wasn't there at that point. So, if you wanted to have a meeting with more than 35 people, then you had to do it in different ways. But we would have 30, 35, 40 people would show up, and we do breakouts into different rooms, but we literally had to put like sort of, there's too many people in this room, go to a different room if it was over like 30, 35 people. Now it's quite a bit different. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about VirBELA,
Yeah.
but now we'll have, 1,100 people in a room, and it'll run better than our 30-person room did back in 2009.
Yeah, and as far as this whole virtual aspect to real estate goes, whether it's for the agents or for the buyers or the sellers, how do you see it playing out? Like, I understand, like, internally for the company, like you have these rooms where you could, you know, converse or whatever it might be, but like as far as the outside world goes, like, do you see it being a situation where that personal, the need for that personal meeting and showing around is not going to be as necessary, and it's going to be like, an agent sitting at home on a virtual headset in a virtual world, showing a buyer a virtual, version of a home that looks very real, where you're both like standing in the home, you're showing them around, you're answering questions. It's the same interaction, it's just not physical.
Right. Well, right now that is in fact taking place. We've got a platform that we use called iSpy 360 that literally allows you to co-walk through 3D or fully immersive 360 views of the home, and literally walk people through the home almost like it's a physical house. And so the real estate agent can do what real estate agents do. They can go, this is the kitchen. Here's they can sort of point at objects to some extent, and paint the picture of the person actually living in or moving into the home. And so right now that's actually really happening. We have consumers that are touring homes with agents in that capacity, and to some extent even making offers on homes sight unseen, without actually having stepped in the home. And again, all this sort of predicated by COVID-19. I think this is temporary. I think that once we're past this on the other side, I think there's a bit of interest in people just going and looking at homes on Sundays just going and touring open houses, and I think that's almost a pastime that is somewhat, what would it be like to live in this house, and so for consumers to be able to continue to have that experience, I think is still a real need, to sort of imagine where they might live. But it doesn't mean that they won't do a lot of the pre-work and use some of these virtualized tools and put on headsets and do virtual walkthroughs of homes, as a way to trim down their list, to bring it down to the top 3 or 4 prospects. But then when it actually comes time to buy the house, they're going to actually want to walk through the house, smell the grass, the outdoors, the whether the house is stinky or not. They're going to want to just know stuff before they actually buy the home, and so the amount of people looking then will probably be very similar to what it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that, so I'm glad I didn't, because you already answered it. But it seems as though a lot of things can be done virtually, but at the end of the day, when you make one of the biggest purchases of your life, that being a home, you do kind of want to touch and feel and see it, and walk around the neighborhood and see what the people are like, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting to see your perspective on that. I'm curious to see where it goes. But another question that comes to my mind, and one that I've thought about ever since working in real estate, was with technology advancing at the rate that it has, and with the information that we have becoming a lot more accessible, things like Zillow and Redfin making that possible for a potential home buyer or even home seller to know what their home is worth or what a home looks like, et cetera, et cetera. Are we in the future going to need realtors at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's two ways to look at it. Is one is, will there be a need to buy and sell homes at some point? Does home ownership become so? Does the home ownership become such a rare commodity that it's really, we're just sort of renting and moving place to place? And then what are the rules around that? And does it become sort of its own? Like, does home ownership become a utility, so to speak, rather than it being something of a wealth creation device? And I think if we end up there, then I think then the role of a realtor goes is really low on the scale of needs. The I think at least for the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, that homeownership is still a fundamental need for a lot of people, where they want to own where they live. They don't want a landlord to potentially kick them out. They don't want to have rents go up, and they want to be able to be in a school district or a neighborhood. And to a large extent, the neighborhoods that tend to be better neighborhoods tend to be less rentals and more home ownership, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's always going to be sort of this have not. And I think for the haves, the ones that can do home ownership, they're going to want to work with a professional to help them through the process. The average person probably only buys 2 or 3 homes during their lifetime, and yet it's a fairly straightforward process, but it's also a very complicated process. You have to understand real estate contracts and earnest money and inspections and mortgages and closing processes and all of that. And since you only do it a few times in your lifetime, you want to be working with somebody who can help you through that process. Now, will the role of a realtor change a bit? Maybe. Will the compensation to a realtor change? Maybe. But I think you're still going to want that trusted professional to walk you through that whole process, because you're doing it so few times. It's not like ordering an Uber that once you've done it a couple times and you're going to do it next week, that it's not going to change much. So that's the way I kind of think about it. That I think if we look out 10 years from now, we're still going to see 1 million plus realtors in the country, real estate professionals, listing and selling homes, but I think what they do will probably change a bit. Probably still going to be touring homes with clients, still be going out to homes and listing them, but then they'll also have an arsenal of other tools in their toolbox, including things like the iBuyer, so Zillow, Open Door, Redfin. Even we have got a platform called Express Offers. There'll be the ability to do an instant sell on your home. So if you don't want to mess with all the showings and everything else, you can get an instant offer on your home and sell it next week and make your move. So I think there'll be,
Right.
5, 10, 15% of the market that might go that direction.
But Glenn, just to push you a little further, just so I think, because I know a lot of people understand real estate, and eventually will either want to be in a position to buy or sell a home. You said eXp has 29,000 realtors and growing. We have 1 million plus realtors in the United States. But as somebody like yourself who understands technology and the power of it, why do we need that many realtors? I understand the need for realtors, even as the landscape changes. But I envision it personally more so as us having real estate advisors who can almost be behind the technology, as opposed to 29,000 plus million plus people physically having to do the job. Right? It might even be a much more lucrative career to be a real estate advisor, backing up that technology, as opposed to being a realtor. Right? So if that happens, how do you see eXp being positioned to change and adapt to that environment?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I think about is that real estate is local. And when I think about that, chances are is in your neighborhood, you probably know 2 or 3 realtors. And you've got relationships with these individuals. You know that they're active in the market. You see them on a regular basis, and so they've built up a relationship with you as an individual to actually be able to help you through the process of whatever it is that you want to do. So I think that's the part where I'm not sure that part of the business will get displaced for a percentage of the population. There's the analyticals, and these are the the folks, especially people that worked at tech companies and also in fintech companies. They don't understand why real estate agents have lasted as long as they've lasted. They felt that they probably should have been out of business like 10, 15 years ago, and they're just kind of going, why is there still a realtor showing property? Because I can figure out the value of the home, I can do my own comps, I can do all of this data analytic work. Why do I have to actually go through the process of actually working with a real estate agent to do this? And why do I have to quote unquote pay these quote unquote high fees to actually get it done? And so you've got that sort of side that's talking that way. But 80-90% of consumers are very touchy-feely, emotional buyers and sellers of property. So for them, engaging with tech to actually deal with the biggest financial transactions of their life, for them, it's not a case of trusting or not trusting the tech. They need the hand-holding, and until they have their own, say, let's just say AI, that they personally trust to actually help them make decisions and walk them through some of this stuff, which I think that could be hugely disruptive. I think about the personal AI as being the thing that could be the game changer, not the AI that's provided by the tech companies that try to disintermediate the real estate agent, but the AI that actually works on behalf of you as a consumer, that can actually understand your preferences and doesn't have a bias in favor of a vendor. I think that's where things could change a bit, and I think that's where once all that sort of, we call it the Zapier of the consumer, where they can sort of plug into whatever they want to plug into, then I think you could have a totally different experience. But whether there'll be enough money to go into it to help the consumer actually achieve that, I don't know. That's sort of the one that I'm not sure about.
I want to talk about this topic of the virtually distributed teams, and we talk about VirBELA and sort of we're seeing what's happening now with everyone working from home, and they're figuring out a way to collaborate virtually and get things done. But for you, I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, where do you see us going? Maybe not even in real estate, but in general, as far as the virtual aspect of just working.
Yeah, well, so I'll give you a little. So I mentioned, obviously, we started using a platform back in 2009, Teleplace. We ended up using another platform called, actually, I don't remember the name of it. Immersive Turf was that one. And then we went to a product called Avaya Engage, and each of these companies effectively went out of business or didn't have or weren't scaling their product. We ended up finding a platform in 2016 called VirBELA, and we actually moved our company onto it. We were at that point, I think we were maybe 1,000 agents, so we weren't huge, but we needed a place that we could actually go to work. And so we ended up moving into this virtual world for work platform. And it's because, again, it created this sense of place, and it had all the trappings of a physical office, but actually done in a campus virtual world environment. For us, it gave us tremendous advantages, and we had committed to not going to an office to actually build our company. And one of the reasons was we had our agents, we said, hey, you're not going to have physical offices to go to. So we actually, as a management team, decided if we're going to ask them not to go to an office, we can't go to an office either. So what do we need to do to sort of solve this dilemma? If we're not going to an office, how do we actually get work done in a meaningful way? So for us, the virtual world for work really solved that. We ended up scaling in VirBELA over 2016 into 2017, and I'd been talking to Alex Howland, who's the founder and president of VirBELA, this whole time, saying, "Hey, Alex, we'd love to buy your company. We'd love to buy your company. We'd love to buy your company." And it wasn't until late in 2018 that he finally said, "Okay, I'm in." So we structured a deal. We rolled him in, and the reason why we wanted to do it from eXp's perspective was we were, up until then, just a SaaS customer. We're just paying some monthly fees, but we were over 50% of the revenues that were going to this small company, VirBELA, just from the fees we were paying. And yet we were sort of stuck in a position that, what if they go out of business? What if they can't scale fast enough? What if somebody comes and buys them? There's all kinds of sort of unknowns for us that we just needed to sort of get our heads around. And the best way to solve that was to actually buy the company, and then in addition to that, invest in the company for our own use. Now, we thought that there'd be other companies that would jump on board the VirBELA platform, and a few had. I think by January this year, we had about 40 different clients that were using VirBELA at some level. Stanford University, Davenport University. We had a number of small businesses and other enterprises that were using the platform, but nobody at scale. But we kept on investing in it heavily over 2019 and early into this year, and then all of a sudden, COVID hit, and we were actually on vacation. Debbie Byrie and I, and we were in Australia. We went to North Carolina. Did an event. We actually rang the bell at NASDAQ the end of January, went to the Super Bowl in Miami, flew to Hawaii like February 6th or something like that, and then went to Australia, and we were doing 6 weeks in Australia while the coronavirus is like basically wreaking havoc around the world, and we're getting kind of nervous. In fact, we moved our flight up coming back home only by 2 days, but like it was like from March 16th to March 14th. We've got countries like canceling flights in and out of the U.S. People are getting quarantined for 14 days coming in from some countries. We're like going, we just need to get freaking back. And at the same time, we knew that this was going to be a great opportunity for VirBELA. So we get back. So I think 14th was a Saturday. And on Monday, I go, okay, I'm going to go work with the VirBELA team. So I just started jumping in there, and I'm like going, we've got people showing up on campus, a fair number, but we decided, hey, let's start putting the word out that this solves this big challenge of remote work. And quickly we went from 40 clients to now we've got probably over 300 clients now using the platform. I mean, some big companies too, like we've got Deloitte in the UK and Australia that's heavily sort of using the platform, really pushing it out there. We've got some other big customers, a lot of them that we're currently under NDA with, that have sort of said, hey, how do we use this like eXp use this platform? Because we get it now. We understand that if we can't go to the office, we have to create some sense of place for people to actually work from. And so it's been like really kind of nuts, the amount of inbounds of people now going, after the pandemic's done, I'm getting rid of leases. We had one company that actually wrote on our internal intranet, said before COVID-19, we didn't know that we even wanted to use a solution like this. Now that we've actually used a solution like this, we're not even going to renew our leases, and they're in a number of different countries. And so they're starting to see the power of the paradigm of actually working in this fully remote fashion.
Explain to us how it works for the end consumer, because I would imagine a lot of people, when they think about a virtual platform, they think wearing a big headset and being immersed in this world, which obviously is the case. But is there more to it than that? Are there other ways that people are sort of getting into this virtual space and able to work together?
Yeah, in fact, ironically, we do have the ability to put on headsets. So we interface with both the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, and maybe some other headsets as well. But 99% of the use case is actually using it as like you would play any sort of normal first-person shooter game. You've got it on your screen. You're looking at your screen. You're looking around, and instead you're using laser pointers versus shooting a gun, and you're going to a room with a desk and sitting at a table, and you're projecting your PowerPoint up onto a screen at the end of the room, and then you're doing having your conversations with everybody else who's in the room. It's all 360 audio, so it's all based on proximity. So people who are sitting close to you can hear much better than people away from you. And so it's got all these trappings of what physically you would expect to have happen. We're just doing it in this virtual office. So up until I think I've only put on the headset maybe 3 times to go in the virtual office. And after about 15 minutes, I'm done. Like I just can't use the headset. But that's not really the best use case for it. The best use case is having it up on your computer in a window, and you sitting in your office inside of maybe a team suite or somewhere on campus, people walking by, seeing that you're there, coming in and saying, "Hey, Glenn, how's it going?" Or or just doing the random check-ins that you would have happen in a physical office, and you just have it sort of there and available for people to have those random um, conversations.
That's awesome. I'm curious, Glenn. So you're obviously, a public company CEO, which is a very different type of CEO. I mean, you have to operate completely differently. There's things that you can and can't say, right, and things that you can and can't do. Um, how has that experience been like? In acquiring VirBELA, what type of effect did that have on the overall company, eXp World Holdings, and you know how is it like dealing with shareholders and board members, et cetera, et cetera? Talk to us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so yeah, obviously being a public company does add some elements that are um, necessary because you're now dealing with shareholders that are quote unquote the public. So there's certainly an element of you're no longer, if you make some bad decisions, it could get scrutinized pretty significantly in a negative context. Where if you're a private company using your own money and you go and try something harebrained, well, who cares? It's your money, and so you do have to think about what are you investing in? Why are you investing in that? But you can also let people know that you're going to use a certain amount of your money for R&D and trying crazy ideas. So you just have to be transparent. Investors just need to know whatever it is that they should know based on what the company is doing. Now, one of the things we've chosen not to do is to provide earnings guidance or revenue guidance. So we're actually pretty low key in terms of actually what we share publicly. So we're not saying we're going to generate X amount of income next quarter, this year, what have you. So we're pretty tight-lipped on that. I think we always were, so that hasn't really changed that much. But there is, we have some independent board members. They run we have an independent audit committee. We've got auditors that actually look at the books every year, and they then sort of judge it for material weaknesses and other challenges that a company might have. But I've to some extent stayed fairly true to my vision of being an entrepreneur, even though we're now a big company. The last trailing 12 months, we've done over $1 billion in revenue. So some big numbers. And yet at the same time, building a really great team has allowed me personally to work in the areas that I can add the most value without feeling like I'm overly oppressed by the quote unquote public company.
And how much time do you spend on VirBELA versus eXp?
So at this point, I'm spending about 85% of my time on VirBELA. So that's since really mid-March. Prior to that, I was probably 70% on eXp and 30% on VirBELA, if that. But with everything going on, I've made this really hard shift and wouldn't have been able to do it without the right team. So I guess one of the things is as we've scaled, and probably this from a founder perspective, finding the right team is absolutely critical if you want to have retain some level of freedom as a founder. Because if you end up doing everything, then you don't have any freedom.
Completely agree. I want to sort of end with this. Given the current situation that we're in, people in every industry, you're seeing all these shakeups. You're seeing the whole world change. So, what's something that you're personally excited about? In the coming years, 10 years, maybe outside of what you're doing now. Is there anything that you're really sort of bullish on, or just excited about seeing it come to fruition?
Yeah. So, I think for me, I'm still looking for the flying car. So that for me, when we can get the flying car, then I know we've made it. The Jetsons is here. Um, it, you, I I'm still really bullish on all the things from a technology perspective, that your load can be lightened. I think that the AI is going to take a huge role in our lives over the next 10 years. We're already seeing it, even though sometimes we don't really know how much it's actually impacting us. But we get on our phones, and Siri and Google and everybody else is trying to figure out, what are you trying to say in this message? What are you trying, who should you be contacting? What should you be paying attention to that maybe you haven't paid attention to today? So I see, this emergence of the AI, but I think we're going to hit some point, maybe the singularity that Ray Kurzweil talks about, where the AI becomes more powerful than what we and the AI can do together. That the AI will actually make our lives totally pleasurable, because it will ultimately solve a lot of things in real time that we right now have to be very much in the problem solving mode around. So I think that there's going to be some element that's going to play a major role from a technology perspective for a lot of people, especially those that work in knowledge-based businesses. I think there's still, agriculture and manufacturing and some other things that the AI may or may not be able to do as much in. But from a technology's perspective and making a lot of the day-to-day decisions that we make as human beings, I think that's going to be probably one of the biggest impactful things that's going to happen to us in the next 10 years or so. Excited about it at some level. Also, I'm scared shitless about it too, because you've got a lot of AIs now that are getting really good. If you've listened to like Google Duplex and you've sort of looked at some of these things that are being created online, the fake, deep fake videos and all those types of things. It's going to be pretty easy for people to be impersonated by an AI and for others not to know who you are. So I think that's going to play into where the role of blockchain, the ability to sort of prove up the authenticity of you as a human being. I think blockchain is going to play a real role in that authentication and then exchange of value. So I'm a big crypto guy. I've been involved in various different projects over time. Built my own Bitcoin money game, sort of a little project I did back in 2014-15, which I thought was kind of fun. But I think that there's just be a lot of things that we'll be able to do with crypto that's going to change the game as well. So exchange of value in a lot of different things that happen. I think that's another one that's a big one.
Glenn, do you know who Satoshi is?
It's I think it's that David guy. He claimed he was. I have no idea, but there's and I
David,
don't. I forget David
Litecoin
Wright
guy?
or something Wright, I think was his name, and he was claiming at one point that he was Satoshi Nakamura.
Yeah, it's gonna be all really exciting to see, and a lot of these things you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, I might have read about EXP in Peter Diamandis's book, "The Future is Faster Than You Think." I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you know that, or have you read it?
Yeah. I think Convergence. I think he was writing in I think the book Convergence, and then actually I just did a talk with him 2 weeks ago, and he's a really big fan of VirBELA. So he's basically saying, hey, for those of you who haven't tried it out, definitely check it out. It's a place where you can actually set up your organization and actually work with people. And Singularity University and multiple parts of the world, we've done numerous interviews with that technology.
And Glenn, I know a lot of people that are tuning in are going to want to know, and I don't know how much you can tell us, but considering all that's going on in the world right now, and especially in the United States, and it's obviously had some sort of impact on the economy in terms of unemployment. The stock market hasn't, really changed way too much. I mean, we still have a little bit of a decrease. By the time we release this podcast, God knows what's going to happen. Every day things are changing. But where do you see the real estate market in terms of residential real estate? What do you see it looking like in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months? And I don't know if you can go as far as giving people advice on what to do, but if you can, we'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's well, we've got a couple things working in our favor. Obviously, 30 million or the unemployment getting close to the largest number I think since World War II or the Great Depression. I think in terms of unemployment.
Yeah.
So what I think one is a lot of the people that are unemployed should, once, companies can go back to their physical spaces, I think a lot of those people are going to be hired back on fairly quickly. So I think we've got some positive pieces there. I think that low interest rates, I'm holding out for sub 3% interest rates to do a refinance. So, if I can get a refinance done at 2.9 anything, I'm like going to be like, that's going to be a really good day. But that also powers the payment buyer. Like almost everybody who buys property uses a mortgage, and the lower the mortgage payment is relative to the size of the house, the more house they can buy, and so I think there's still I think that's going to put some upward pressure on pricing, even though at the same time we're going to probably have a slower housing market and probably more inventory on the market for some period of time while everybody's getting back to work. So hopefully, we could look back 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, and we're back to relatively full employment. And so that does mean that in the short run, we're going to have some sort of dip, which we're already seeing, 15, 20% decrease in real estate transactions probably by the end of the year. We're down across the board. I think we're down like 30%, versus where we expected we wanted to be, like for the month of April and probably May. But we're not seeing as down a trajectory as we were potentially thinking about back in February and March. We were thinking that we might have been gone to 25% of the sales volume in real estate, and it certainly has not been that bad. But if I think about right now, if you can get a mortgage, and assuming that you're a mortgage buyer, if you're a cash buyer, different animal. But if you're going to be buying, I think that being able to snag a low interest rate and being able to find the home that you could see yourself living in for the next 5, 7, 10 years, I think it really becomes somewhat of a no-brainer if you can get into it. And obviously, we've got credit scores are a little bit higher that are needed for most mortgages. So there's some things working against us. But if you can get into a home, and I would say in the next 2, 3, 4 months, you could be seeing some bargains that you wouldn't see, you won't see a year and a half from now. So really take advantage of that. And there's people that are going to need to sell second homes, third homes, because they're not going to want to travel. They're not going to want to travel across the country. So a lot of those second and third homes, I think, are going to come on the market as potential properties for people to pick up, and some of those are in pretty nice locations as well. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I'm not fundamentally scared of the what's going to happen in the housing market. I think it's just a matter of a reset. We saw a big reset in 2008, 2009, 2007, really 2007, 2008, 2009, but 2008 especially. I think we'll go through the reset. Maybe we go out another year, and then we're back to whatever the new normal is. And then it's just again, we'll just continue to see things continually improve as long as the economy doesn't take a huge hit.
Well, Glenn, we appreciate you hanging out with us, and I'm sure we could sit down and talk for hours, but we won't, keep going, and hopefully we'll save a conversation for a later date and see where you're at and where eXp and VirBELA are at, and how, once this pandemic is over, how all those things kind of end up and where they go. So best of luck with all you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to share your experiences and your knowledge and your wisdom with, both of us, but also, the thousands of people that listen to us as well. So thank you again, and we hope to, chat with you again soon.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Posh. Thanks, Pat. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Thanks, Glenn. Likewise.
Thanks, Glenn.